Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's college chat. I am Dr. Jennifer Winward. I'm the founder and CEO of Winward Academy. On behalf of Winward Academy and our nonprofit partner, the Carol Kimmelman Athletic and Academic Campus, I am thrilled to host today's college chat with three exceptional college students. Now, the goal for today is them to provide more information to you about their college trajectories, about their experiences, about challenges that they've overcome, right? The whole goal is really that they're highlighting for you all of the ways that you can take advantage of a college experience. Now, I do, before we begin, want to give a special shout out to the avid students at San Ysidro High School who were amazing and actually submitted all of the questions that Omar, Karina, and Natan are going to answer today. So the format for what we're going to do together, you're going to hear from each of the panelists one at a time, again, with those great questions that were submitted by the amazing avid students at San Ysidro. Then at the end, we're going to welcome them all back to do additional questions that you submit in the chat. So as we're going through the presentation today, if you have any questions or any extra ideas or things that come to your mind, please feel free to put them in the chat. And then again, at the end, when all of the panelists are back on the screen, we'll go ahead and do those questions. So what I'd like to do now is kind of introduce each of them to you. So I'm going to read you a little bit of a short bio for each panelist. And then since Omar is going to be our first one, I'll then welcome him on the screen and we'll go ahead and start with his questions. So Omar is a junior at the University of Pennsylvania. He is double majoring in medical anthropology and health and societies, and he does have a specific concentration in global health. He has an amazing job at the West Philly Health Center, where he works as a socio-medical researcher to inform care for patients in West Philadelphia. What does he plan to do after college? Well, he plans to pursue a post-bac program. For those of you who don't know, a baccalaureate, right, that's kind of your 4 years of undergrad. A post-bac program means that kind of in between your undergrad experience and a graduate experience, you kind of do some additional work. So he wants to do one of those post-bac programs with a pre-med focus, or he wants to pursue a master's in public health. He is very busy at UPenn. He is a mixed methods researcher. He's a peer advisor. He actually gives tours, and he's a member of the CIP ACTLI Hispanic Honor Society. Now, after you meet Omar today, you're going to meet Karina. She is a senior at UC Berkeley. She's actually on campus right now in a study room. So it'll be interesting to kind of hear more from her about how some of the UC schools have handled the COVID situation with students being able to be on campus. I know probably a lot of you have questions about that. She is majoring in legal studies and psychology, and she's minoring in Portuguese and ethnic studies. She aspires, as amazing as she is, to attend a top 14 law school after taking time to pursue some professional work in between. So again, kind of part of what you might hear from her is that when you have these amazing aspirations for grad school, kind of similar to what Omar, you'll learn from him as well. A lot of times kind of in between your undergrad and graduate experience, you pursue work experience, or you work in a lab, or you know, in Karina's case, might try to work at a law firm or for a judge or something like that to build those professional real life experiences. Now at Berkeley, she's also been very busy. She participates in Lambda Theta Nu sorority, the ASUC office of Senator Omatara Oloye, and I really hope I said that correctly. If I mispronounced that, I hope Karina will correct me, and the Basic Needs Center. She also interned at the U.S. House of Representatives in Washington, D.C. After you meet Karina today, you're going to meet Natan, who is a senior at Dartmouth. He is majoring in sociology, minoring in markets and the economy. He interned at Converse last summer. So those of you who are really interested in business of fashion and fashion design will love meeting Natan. And as amazing as he was offered a full-time position to continue at Converse when he graduates. So that's what he's going to be doing when he graduates this spring. He co-founded a fashion brand, a clothing line called Our House, It has a mission to providing a house to young, diverse creatives. He is the vice president of the Theta Eta chapter of Alpha Phi Alpha fraternity. He's the president of the consulting group, and he is also the social chair of the Fashion Association. So I'm sure you are all seeing that we have an amazing group of panelists today. So I'm going to go ahead and get started with Omar. So Omar, if you could please turn on your camera and microphone. I'm going to stop my screen share so I can see you bigger. Good morning. How are you, Omar?
Good morning. I'm good. I'm very happy to be here.
Oh, we're so happy to have you. So as you maybe heard me mention, we have some questions that have been prepared by some of our students in the AVID program. And so I'm just going to go ahead and jump right in. Looks like the first question is, what is one piece of advice that you would give your younger college self?
Yeah, I think one piece of advice I wish I would give my younger college self is actually the same piece of advice I would give to my high school self, which is to really think about my narrative and only participate in things that I'm really passionate about. In high school, I was guilty. I overcommitted myself to a bunch of things, and I felt like I did the same thing when I came to Penn. And I was in a bunch of clubs, and that's a little dangerous because I'm first a student, and then second, I do have my interests and passion. And I did come from a public high school where it is possible to participate in everything. And in college, you just can't do that. And so there's this fear of missing out, which is, we just call it FOMO. And I wish I told myself, my younger college self, to just maybe just commit myself to things that I'm really passionate about rather than, over promising and under delivering.
Yeah, and I like what you said too about kind of your narrative, right? Because a lot of the students who are joining us today are either going to college, this coming fall, or maybe they're juniors and sophomores. And so they're going to be working on their applications in the next few years. That narrative piece is so important, right? Because you talked about pursuing activities that you're really passionate about, because then what happens is they really form your narrative, right? When it comes to needing to write essays to apply, when you've participated in things that you're really passionate about, then again, it just, I think, helps to build that story. So I'm glad that you had that or said that, because I think it's a good little extra tidbit of advice related to their college apps. Next question, what are some of the challenges that you faced during college, and how have you overcome them?
Yeah, coming into I'm also the first in my family to go to college, and I want to premise my answer by saying that because I did come into college without any guidance. Whenever I do face issues, I'm usually solving them on my own. And so, the biggest challenge that I encountered in college was getting accustomed to the workload. I did come from I came from a public high school, and it was very easy and very possible to just do things last minute and then do really well. And so when I came to college, I wasn't really prepared to be a good student. And being a good student means I manage my time. I am able to distribute the workload so that I'm not stressed every day. I'm also making sure that, and when you come to college, it does feel like I'm an adult because I do have complete control of my time. I can choose to skip class if I wanted to. I can choose to get exercise if I wanted to. And same goes for like sleeping and stuff like that. So I think the biggest challenge that I faced was redefining independence and redefining what it meant to be a good student. And it took me my freshman year to figure that out. And I'm just very happy with the growth. And really, I think if anybody else experiences this, they should be very comfortable with that experience because everybody goes through it. And again, just focusing on growth rather than being defeated by the situation.
So I want to kind of throw something back at you here. So you started by saying that you felt like this challenge you had was partially because you were the first in your family to go to college. What if we asked you to kind of turn that around? How do you think that being the first person in your family to go to college has actually been your greatest asset? Right. So I know that you mentioned that it made things more challenging because you've had to navigate a lot more on your own, but what do you think has made the experience more special or kind of better or unique for you because you are the first in your family to go to college?
Well, I think it's definitely a blessing because when I first experienced the success of getting accepted into various universities, I think that was a milestone for me because it showed me that I was able to overcome adversity. and I would be able to, this is going to be corny, but like really make sure like my vision becomes true, making my dreams become a reality. And I grew up not even knowing I would go to college. I thought I mean, sophomore year of high school, I was like, yeah, I want to do something in healthcare. Nursing sounds good. And so I think just the grit that I've developed and the resilience that I've developed just from having to independently figure stuff out has actually been really good because um, I think it gives me a confidence that some of my peers might not have.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Amazing. What about for students kind of considering specific colleges? Like, how should they even research schools to figure out if they are a sophomore and they think they're interested in healthcare? Like, how do you even begin starting to do research to learn more about what colleges offer?
Yeah, you know, it's so important to like do your research about the schools that you're interested in. So if you're just getting started on this process, and I started right about my junior year, again, just playing stuff by ear and figuring out what I would like to commit my life to. Um, for me, the first important thing was the cost of attendance. I knew that if I were to go to college, that I had to um, just have it covered. It had to be some sort of financial aid. And so I did some research on financial aid, and I learned the different types of financial aid. So you have like, you know, merit-based financial aid, which means you just have your numbers really high and you get merit um, award. And
Mm-hmm.
then the other financial aid, which was the one that I actually looked at the most, was need-based financial aid. And so when you look at need-based financial aid, it is just based on your household income. And so I narrowed down my universities, and usually these were like top universities because they're very endowed. Um, and that's how I figured out, okay, these are the universities that can cover me. And then I was like, okay, do these universities have things that I'm interested in studying? And so that's when I just go, I search up the university name, like majors, and then I just go through every single one that catches my attention. And I came across one my junior year. It was called Health and Societies, and it's a combination of sociology, history, and anthropology. And I didn't see it anywhere else. It was interdisciplinary. It was unique to Penn, and I remember I was like, yeah, this is the one. And so I submitted my application with that. And although a lot of students do change their majors, I actually committed to it, and I'm studying that now. It's exactly what I was hoping it would be. Um, but again, I definitely recommend starting wide, maybe starting with the financial aspect of it, then narrowing down your universities based on whether you can afford it or not, if that's important to you. And then from there, just typing up the university, major, minors, and then kind of going through it slowly and surely.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. It sounds like you were very systematic, right, with your approach. But the other thing, too, that you shared that I really want to highlight is that you identified something specific at a university, right? There was a unique program that had this blended approach for the major that was interdisciplinary, that touched on a lot of areas you're interested in. So then what happens is when you do apply to a school like UPenn and they say, why do you want to come here? Your answer was very specific. It was well researched, it was thoughtful. So then if I'm the person in admissions at Penn and I'm reading about why Omar wants to come here, how do I feel, right? I feel like, wow, he knows what he's talking about. He's done research. He sees how he can connect to this unique program that we offer, right? All of that makes a huge difference in the application process. So I'm glad that you shared that experience. And you're right, you are still in the major that you said that you wanted to be, but of course that isn't necessarily true for everyone. So hopefully either Karina or Natan will kind of touch on maybe the changing of majors experience, because of course that does happen for lots of students. Okay, so next question, is the application process hard? How much time should I set aside to do my college applications?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think um, one thing that I experienced was this delay, and I was like, okay, like I'm not sure this is going to happen. Let me just push it off a little longer. Let me push it off a little longer. And I really wish that I got into the process sooner, um, especially because the application process is not just filling out the application, but the application process includes so many other things, like establishing good relationships with a few people, and then maybe having them recommend you later on. It also includes studying for the SAT or the ACT, doing good on that, and then using that later on. And so the application process is very implicit in your 4 years of high school, and it begins earlier than you'd like it to. And so one thing that I wish I did was perhaps maybe do SAT prep sooner, or maybe establish more relationships with my teachers. And I did those things. But I think it wasn't made clear to me that those things are the application process. And the lifestyle you have as a student in high school is your application process. But the actual, opening up the online portal and filling out your resume and putting in the essays and stuff, that stuff is you can get it done in a short amount of time. But one thing that's important is it's going to be very tempting to get feedback. So you write an essay, you want to get feedback on it. You write your resume, you want to get feedback on it. And it's very easy to lose your voice in doing those things. And so it's dangerous. And when you have admission officers who are evaluating applications, they can identify when your voice is not the same from one piece of writing to the other. And that's not saying get everything reviewed by the same person. It means that when you're applying, you want to make sure that the application process is representative of you. And
Mhm.
that's actually another very hard part about the application. And earlier today, I was just saying that I ended up doing way too many things, and I wish I had a consistent narrative. Well, in the application process, you're going to find out if you were doing too many things or not, because what ends up happening is you have a word bank of activities, and you're like, which one do I use? And you do want them to be somehow connected. And I think the application process is difficult for that reason, right? It's difficult because it requires consistency for such a long amount of time, and it also requires you to figure out your authenticity and your presentation for yourself.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. And I love too that you talked about, yes, the applications themselves are writing essays, receiving feedback carefully, right? As you then decide what you want to take and implement to still honor your voice and kind of filling everything out. But that it also involves those other pieces, right? That not everyone always thinks about. So I'm really glad that you brought that up, right? How important it is to just be prepared, to do things early, to nurture those great relationships so that you can have the most incredible letters of recommendation, right? All of that really makes a big difference. Okay, one more question, and then we'll invite Karina to join us. How different are college classes from high school classes? So you mentioned in the beginning that you kind of got away with a lot in high school, kind of waiting, cramming. So how is that different from when you ended up in college?
Yeah, this is actually I identify as a hard worker rather than somebody who can figure stuff out on the spot. But this also means I'm willing to sleep 2 hours if I need to. And so I think in high school, the classes are set up so that you're constantly reminded when you have to do things. You're always getting pushed to do things by your counselors, like, hey, check out this program, check out this thing. Your teachers are always reminding you of deadlines. And then when you get to college, it's complete independence. You get handed a piece of paper, it's called a syllabus, and it literally has every deadline from the beginning of the semester to the end of it, which is like half a year. And that's it. That's all the reminder you're going to get for everything, right? So they don't remind you when the exam is. If they're kind, they will. And it's so funny. In high school, if someone did that, if a teacher did those things, we would say that's a terrible teacher, right? But then in college, when they do that, it's perfectly okay. And then you redefine what it means to be a good teacher. You're looking at people who can convey the information. You're looking at people who are willing to have meaningful teaching lessons. And so the hard part is a good teacher is redefined, and independence is redefined in college, and that makes classes a completely different experience.
Sure, sure. Well, great. Well, thanks, Omar, for chatting with me. We're going to go ahead and welcome Karina now. And then, of course, Omar, you'll be coming back to join us at the end. So, Karina, if you're there, please go ahead and turn on your camera and unmute yourself. I can see you.
Hi.
Perfect. Hi, good morning.
Good
You're
morning.
joining us from a study room at Berkeley.
I am in the study room right now.
Amazing, amazing. Well, good morning, and thank you so much for joining us.
Of course.
So just as we did with Omar, I'm going to just kind of jump into some of these questions that students have prepared for you. So maybe if you could you describe a day in the life of a college student? So how many hours are you in classes? How much free time do you have? Study time, fun? Like what's kind of that experience like?
Okay, yeah. So on a typical day, I would I would say like pre-pandemic, right? I'm just gonna reiterate what Omar said. Like you're able to choose your schedule, right? So you're able to choose how many classes you want to have a day. And on most days, I would say like when it came to like freshman year, I had classes every day. But like right now, I have classes only like on Monday to Thursday. So I have like a 3-day weekend every week, which is great. So I would say I was in class like maybe like 3 to 4 hours a day, right? And then between classes, I would like hang out with my friends, or I would study at the library, or like um, do whatever I needed to do between those time periods. And I would study right in between. And then after my day was done, I would either be in meetings on campus, whether it was like a sorority meeting, or whether it was just like a regular org meeting. And as well, like just having fun, right? Being on campus, you could do a lot of things. Like a lot of people sit on the glade. The glade here is kind of like this really big piece of like grass next to the campanelli. So like people would go out there and have like picnics, right? Like right in between classes. And just like study out there. So definitely you mix classes and study time and fun time all in between in the same day.
Yeah. Well, you sound busy. But what I do like that you shared, which is something that I've even given advice to the students I teach at UC San Diego, is, when you have your classes, you might be on campus or kind of engaged in classes for 3 to 4 hours a day. But oftentimes you find yourself with a little 1 hour gap between classes or a 2 hour gap between classes. And it's very tempting to view that time as like, I'm just going to go chill, I'm going to go hang out, right? Where if you look across a week, right, that's a lot of time that kind of adds up, that if you do treat it in a way that's efficient, can really then make things easier on you when it comes to your studying or when it comes to reviewing for exams. So while you sound so busy, I'm glad to hear that you also emphasize how important it is to kind of be efficient in those smaller moments. So then when you do have time to relax and you do have time to have fun, it's just that much more special, right? Because you can really relax. So that's great. So this is a question that I know a lot of students are burning to hear, is how did the pandemic change your college experience? And
Yeah.
you're a senior, right? So this was kind of your big year, right? So share that with us, please.
Yeah, no, definitely. Well, when the pandemic hit, I was in DC, right? I was doing this program called UCDC, which if you go to a UC, this program is offered to all of the UCs. So you're able to take like a semester off in DC, right? And like focus on doing an internship, but also taking classes there. So I was doing that, and the pandemic hit like mid-March, right? And I was supposed to be out there till like the end of April. So it definitely cut my time short. And I came back, right? And I was like, oh my God, like now I'm doing like this online transition, like, and in a whole new state, right? So that was kind of crazy. Just doing that. And it was kind of sad, right? Because I really wanted to finish my internship there. But then in the summer, I was supposed to do a study abroad, right? And this was like my first time I was going to study abroad. So that got canceled. And like I already had everything booked for London, right? I was supposed to go to London and study there and have an internship. So definitely that kind of sucked. So just coming back and like kind of figuring out like, okay, like what do I do now, right? Like I feel like I'm a senior, but I didn't get to experience everything that the university had to offer. And so what I did was like I really reflected on what I wanted to do, and I was like, well, what can I do in like this pandemic online environment, right? And I was like, well, I really want to graduate, right? Like that's a whole thing of like me coming to college. Like I want to have this whole ceremony where like my family's there, but at the same time I want to keep them safe. And I was like, I'm just not ready to graduate yet. So what I decided to do was take an extra semester. So I'm gonna be graduating in the fall now, so that would be December 2021.
Mm-hmm.
So hopefully by then we're able to have like at least like a hybrid ceremony, but again, that's all in the works right now. But yeah, and then I ended up taking another minor. So I'm doing like the ethnic studies minor because I was like, you know what, like I've always wanted to study the history of like the people who look like myself, right? And I was like, well, I never really had a chance to do that just because I'm a double major, and like I was always so busy just trying to complete those classes and completing my breadth as well, right? And I was like, you know what, yeah, let's take it, let's do that. And so yeah, now I'm doing like ethnic studies minor, and in the summer I'm actually going to do like a virtual summer abroad, just because I did get like this scholarship that I was supposed to go or supposed to get when I went to London. So yeah, I'm going to be doing that. So yeah, it definitely changed my whole plans around. But I'm still thankful, right, that I'm still here and I'm still able to learn more.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, it sounds like you've done a lot of adapting and also some reflecting, and also that you've looked for opportunities to kind of make the best of some of the things that were planned for you, and kind of this perfect plan that you had for yourself that, very much kind of fell apart in a lot of ways. But it's nice to hear that you're looking for kind of personal things that will matter to you that you can now pursue as a way to kind of, continue your education and still have a great experience. So that's fantastic. Another student asked about accommodations in high school, right? So maybe somebody gets, excuse me, extra time for an exam, or can take an exam in a, smaller space or with kind of fewer students. How can that student receive similar accommodations in college?
Yeah. So here at Berkeley, we call it DSP. And so what you do is you talk to your advisors, right? And these accommodations can be for anything, right? Whether you're going through a mental crisis, whether it's depression, whether it's anxiety, and definitely take care of yourself and look for those resources, because at the end of the day, like, everybody here wants to help you and everybody wants to help you succeed, right? And see you succeed. So definitely what you can do is look at like the accommodation. They probably have like accommodation website for your school or the school that you're thinking of attending.
Mhm.
So definitely look into that. You do have to do some paperwork, at least the process that I know here. You have to do some paperwork with like a psychiatrist or something like that. Get in contact with your advisor, and then they write up this letter depending on your accommodations, and they are able to send it to your professors, right? So you're able to get extended time, right? It could either be like 150% time or like 200% time, which is, it could be like an hour to 2 hours to 30 minutes more, right? So that's good. And you could also get like extended deadlines for your assignments.
Mhm.
But yeah, definitely, I think in college, one thing is being able to take care of your mental health. That's like very important for a lot of people here. And I think that's one of the main things that I really learned coming to college, and like that transition from high school to college was mental health, right? Because I feel like I didn't really know what that was back in high school. And I was like, how am I able to take care of myself and my academics at the same time?
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, and one thing that I'll add to that, just because I have been a professor at a college, is you're exactly right, right? A student will receive a letter. And what I want all the students on the call to understand is that it's a completely private experience that you have with your professor, right? So if I had a student in my class come to me with a letter that says, I'm qualified to receive time and a half and to take my exams in a different space, or I'm qualified to have a note taker, or kind of whatever it is, right, that the student would receive, I will, of course, accommodate that as the professor. And then everything is just a private conversation with us, right? So it's not like when I give a student an A in my class, there's a little asterisk that said this student got extra time. That is not how it works, right? So I want to reassure students that whatever accommodations you receive in high school will continue when you go to college, as long as what Karina said, right? You have to be on top of it. You have to have your documentation. You have to organize all the paperwork, right? So there is kind of a time experience there, but it will be accommodated, and your professors will of course support you with what you need. Okay, great. So I'm going to ask you one more question, Karina, and then we'll go ahead and welcome Natan. What advice would you give for having a successful freshman year, right? So what's maybe a challenge a student could expect that, we can think about now to anticipate, or just kind of any other advice for a successful freshman year?
Yeah, okay, so I'm just like reflecting back on like my freshman year. I feel like coming from high school, like I was so involved in high school, right? And I was like, oh my God, okay, I'm in college, I want to break, right? And so I think for me, like what I did was like, okay, like I don't really want to be involved too much. And I think that was challenging. That was my greatest challenge, right? Not being out there enough, and like
Mm,
just meeting people. So I think my greatest advice for you guys, right, to have a successful freshman year, definitely go out there. and meet people and like meet people in your classes. Here at Berkeley, we do like tabling, and this happens like the first 2-3 months of school happening, right? Mostly like 2 months. And so there's like a whole like line of like just organizations that want to meet you, and they have the school itself, right? And I'm sure that like the school, wherever you attend, they're gonna have these events, where like they recruit these organizations, right? Whether it's from campus or off campus, that they definitely want to meet you and want to be part of. They want you to be part of their team, right?
Mhm.
So definitely just go out there and meet people. And even if it's not in your interest, right? Like I did stuff like the basic needs center that is not necessarily what I want to do, but I was like, you know what, like it's not in my major, but I still want to do it, right?
Mhm.
So I went out there and just like met new people. But yeah, my greatest advice definitely,
Mm.
meet people, don't be shy, right? You meet so many genuine souls on campus. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. Well, it sounds like something, excuse me, both you and Omar shared, right? Was that in high school, you guys were both very overscheduled. And then when you got to college, it was kind of a little reset time. Maybe with you, you scaled back too much and then realized, wait a minute, I'm pulling myself away from these things and it's having a social impact, right? Because the one thing about activities that you're involved in is it gets you out there, it gets you meeting people, it gets you making friends, it gets you feeling connected to those genuine souls you described right on your campus. So yeah, so I think that that's great advice, because you're right, this transition is kind of a reset. It's a time of more independence, it's a time of figuring out how to study, right? And if that looks different from how you studied in high school, and there's a lot going on. So I think that your message around, connecting with yourself, connecting with your community, kind of really pursuing ways to do that is just so critical. Well, thank you, Karina. We'll go ahead and welcome you back in a few minutes. Natan, if you're there, if you could please turn on your camera and join us. Hello, hello.
How are you?
I'm doing great. How about you?
I'm doing well. I'm doing well.
Good, good. So glad to hear that. Thank you again for joining us. So first question for you. What if there is a student who is looking at a college, a dream college, but maybe doesn't quite meet the GPA requirement or doesn't quite meet kind of the ACT or SAT averages? Should the student apply?
Absolutely. I could talk a little bit about my experience. I think that I I graduated top of my class in high school, so I met necessarily the GPA requirement for a lot of schools, but the SATs is something that I struggled with. I took the SAT 4 times, um, and I mean, each time I improved, and it took a while for me to practice. It took a while for me to get the hang of things. But I would say, one thing that I got down on myself in high school because I said, I'm good at all these other things, but this one test that's supposed to determine my future, I can't really conquer well. Um, but I would say that, as that test, don't let it determine your future, and don't let it determine like where you can end up. I took a chance and I wrote a really nice piece with my essay. Just I made sure that everything else was up to par. I made sure that everything else um, and it was great. And then I was able to highlight the skills and my personality through my paper, through my interviews, all these things. Ultimately, the SAT score was not. They didn't even look at it. I mean, they might have obviously, but they didn't take that in consideration. And I think that they also take in consideration where you're from,
Mhm.
where what high school you attend, and they compare you to those students. You're not being compared to the larger demographic of the students who apply to these specific colleges. You're getting compared to your area, and they take all these things into consideration because it's a holistic view.
Mhm.
Um, so ultimately, I did really well compared to my area. I did really well um, comparatively, and then in terms of like Dartmouth standards, I still did pretty well, but um, obviously, I wasn't at the 1500s that they usually look at. But I wouldn't let that discourage you. Not even the GPA, because oftentimes students have responsibilities outside of school. They have to take care of their parents or take care of siblings. All those things are important, and they consider all those things.
Mhm. Yeah, and something that you said that I think is really important, right? Like applying to college, when you look at the numbers, of course, you want to feel like you're kind of in that range of the students they typically accept. But what I love that you shared is that, even if there was this one part of your application where you felt like it wasn't as strong, I'm sure it was still strong, but maybe not, at that 1500 level, that you looked for other places in your application to really showcase who you are, what you care about, what you do with your time, right? And by doing that, it really elevated your personality, it elevated your skills, and it gave them a sense that they got to know you. And so then of course they're in a position where they're like, well, we like this person, right? Where character is such an important part of this process, and really trying to attract people who are just great people who are going to work hard. Excuse me. So yeah, I'm really glad that you shared that. That's fantastic. Now, certain activities or hobbies, like, is there anything that you would want to share that you feel like stands out more than others? Maybe about your experience or what you see your friends doing on campus that maybe students should consider looking into.
Absolutely. I mean, I was always involved in high school, and then when I got to college, I even got more involved. Um, and I think because there were so many opportunities, there were things that I didn't know um, even existed. I didn't know what the sport of rugby was. I used to wear rugby polos, but I didn't know what rugby was. Uh, so as soon as I got on campus, I joined with the rugby team. Um, there were other things like fencing, pottery, um, the wood shop. Like I learned how to make a coffee table. I learned how to make a mug and all these different things that just like we have a, they got rid of it this year, unfortunately, but there was this music studio and they had like DJ boards. So I learned how to be a DJ. Um, like there's so many opportunities and I was like a deer in headlights. I was just super excited, intimidated at first and then super excited because it's just like, there are all these things that I didn't have access to before. I didn't have an art program. In high school. So I got to college and I was able to like join the arts, like do the arts there and take a lot of art classes, like edging, stones and all these things. So I would say that there's so many opportunities in college. Don't take off too much because I think that freshman year I struggled with that. I was super excited, super involved that like my academics, that transition was harder for me. I didn't sleep because I was trying to catch up. So definitely take it with a grain of salt, but join all these different programs. And I think this is the first time that you can explore things without having to, you still have the resume build, but this is the first time you can explore things without trying to like show off. Cause I think that was often the narrative in high school is like, oh, become the debate team, like join the National Honor Society, join all these other things because they look good. Um, but then I feel like college was my first opportunity where I could just do things as I wanted to.
Yeah, that's awesome. And do you feel like, I know I mentioned this in your bio at the beginning, so I'm going to digress here for a second and ask you to expand on something there. Do you feel like when you transition and had more opportunities to kind of pursue more creative and artistic things, do you think that that's maybe where a lot of your interest in fashion, or was that always there, but then you were able to nurture that? Like, how does that relate to kind of your career focus in fashion?
Absolutely. That's funny you mentioned that. I think I was always interested in fashion. That's
Okay.
something I've always been in love with. My grandma, I used to bug my mother and my grandmother to help me like customize clothing. So I would go to like the Goodwill, buy something and like cut it up and make it into something new and like steal my mom's curtains and like make a shirt or something. Um,
You would
so
steal
that,
her curtains?
yeah,
Did you replace them?
yeah, I would replace them.
Okay.
Um, so like I would take old curtains and stuff and make it and it got to the point where like so something I always wanted to do. I did it in high school. I wrote my college essay on like my experience with like clothing and what my mission was and all that stuff. Um, but then when I got to college, there was this pressure to make a lot of money, to graduate and make a lot of money, join Wall Street. So I was on that trajectory. I did an investment internship my sophomore year. My freshman year, I did like a private equity. So I was really gonna go into like finance and stock markets and all this stuff, and consulting. And then I realized I was moving further and further away from myself
Mm,
because it was pressure that if I graduate from this university, that I have to go and make these dollars.
mhm,
And obviously, coming from an immigrant family, that's the understanding that you become a lawyer, a doctor, a banker. And that was so I think junior year, I was like super down on myself, almost to the point of depression. I got angry and I was like, what is wrong with me? Like, why don't I feel like myself? And I think that it was because I was doing all these things that didn't align with my values, didn't align with who I was. Um, so then I did a complete 360 and said, you know what, I'm gonna do an internship in fashion and see and hope that I can match, because money's still important, obviously, but I think I was able to find that balance where I can make the money that's necessary for me to live and to help my family, but also do the things I love.
Yeah. Yeah. That's awesome. Yeah. And you even got an internship at Converse during COVID. Clearly, we're able to just crush it, even in a virtual space, for them to really know and appreciate your talents and want you there full time. So I'm excited for your future there. So this next question is painful for me to ask as a college professor because I'm nervous for your answer. But the question is, are most lectures in college boring as described in the movies? And you've never taken my class, so any answer you say is not relevant to my teaching, but go ahead.
I would say, I would say, sit in the front. If you sit in the back, you will shop, you will play on whatever, like you won't pay attention. This is true. Like if you're in a large lecture hall, it is the chances of you getting lost in lecture hall are is there's so much stuff going around you. And the reason why I say don't sit in the back is because even if you're not shopping, someone in front of you may be shopping and you look at their computer. Um, so I say always sit in the front. Um, I personally love small classes. I'm not a big fan of lecture. I get lost. But I would say um, not all lecture halls are boring. I took one on modern American drama, and that was a 175-person class. And that class, we were like reciting plays and stuff. Like someone would stand up and like do a soliloquy, and like so that was a lecture where you couldn't necessarily fall asleep. But I would say there's some intro courses that are not the most pleasant. So just try to stay engaged. If you take a lecture, take it in the morning. I took a 6:30 p.m. lecture right in dinner. I was exhausted. At that point, yeah, I needed to sit in the front. If not, I was gonna fall asleep.
Yeah. So it sounds like your answer to the question is that yes, sometimes lectures can be boring, but to kind of anticipate that it's long, there are a lot of possible distractions. So you just have to know yourself. You have to kind of put yourself in a situation so that you will be engaged, you won't fall asleep, you won't shop, right? And that you kind of wait to do those things after.
Absolutely.
Okay. What about professors being accessible? Like, have you had an experience where you can get to know them and they'll help you, or do they seem to be pretty kind of standoffish?
Oof. I think it's like all things. I think it's what you put into it is what you're gonna get out.
Mhm.
Most professors take the job because they genuinely love learning. They genuinely love the intellectual debates. They love like hearing new ideas. So you're gonna get some professors who, just like all things, may not want to be as open, but then you're gonna get others that are extremely open and really want to get to know you. I've had the luxury of like going and having dinner with professors. I've had worked on external projects with professors outside of class. They become my mentors, and that was really because wanted to take an interest in what they were doing. A lot of these professors do amazing things. They're
Mhm.
not just in there teaching class. They're writing these amazing books. They're doing they're guest lecturers in other places. So these people are truly passionate about what they're doing, and you'll not there's not going to be another opportunity where you have access to these great amount of people all the time
Mhm.
at your disposal who are willing to help you out. So I think that for the most part, it's what you put in, and I find that more professors are open than not. um, you just have to stay behind, I say that helps in your favor too. If you're going through tough times in your life, you need an accommodation, the professor is more likely to give you one.
Mhm.
If you stayed behind and spoke to professor or came before class or went to office hours, I pretty much go to every office hour, introduce myself, and then talk about the material a little more. I mean, they love to see that. So
Yeah, they do. They do love to see that, right? There's nothing better than when a student comes to office hours, introduces himself or herself, is excited about the material, asks questions that show that the person's really engaged, right? That is the best. So I would definitely second that advice. It's a great thing to have to build those relationships with professors, because to your point, Natan, right, these professors have relationships with people at other universities. They have relationships with people in various industries, and building and nurturing those relationships can really be a springboard, right, for future opportunities and for future careers and all of that. So I'm glad to hear that you've had great experiences with a lot of your professors. Okay, so we have about 15 minutes left. So I'm going to welcome back Omar and Karina. So kind of at the end, we'll have all of you with us to be able to do more questions. Now, we do have some that were submitted from students, so I can jump into those while we see if anybody writes any new questions in the chat or in the Q&A. So the first question I have is, where do you feel it is best to study? So kind of among Natan, Omar, or Karina, if any of you wants to jump in, you just kind of put your hand up and go ahead and answer. Where's the best place to study? Karina's in a study room, so I feel like she should answer this question.
Okay, yeah, I'll answer it.
Okay.
Definitely not in your room. And it's been hard, right? Because we're in an online environment, and like I am in my room when I'm doing class, right? But definitely, like, at least right now, right, talking in an online environment, have that space where you have like bright light, you're able to sit down and able to really engage with the material. I think really turning your camera on while in class really helps keeping you one, active and listening, right? In terms of like if we were in a physical environment, for me, it was a library for sure. And on campus, well, at least for my campus, right, we have so many libraries. We have like 4 or 5. And each one is very different. There are like levels where like one, it's like super noisy to like super quiet, right? So I would go to like the basement of like the library and just go in there and just do my stuff, right? Because I was like, okay, I have an hour before I have to go to another class, right? And sophomore year of college was so stressful because I was literally on campus at like 9 a.m. and like left at 9 p.m., right? Like I was on campus all day, and I was like, okay, I need to find my space to do it. So definitely the libraries, and there's also going to be spaces on campus that are designated for you, right? For us, we have like the Multicultural Center. So I would go in there. We had like the PSC. I would go in there, right? And just really go in there and study, right, and do my thing. So definitely a quiet space works for me. And I am in a study room right now, and it is quiet, so it helps.
Good. So it sounds like having that dedicated space where you know that you want to focus, where you have great light, where it's quiet, right? That is important to create for yourself. And that, I mean, even I'm sure a lot of the high schoolers joining us right now have had this challenge of trying to study and eat and sleep in the exact same physical space, right? When you can't get that distance or that separation, it's hard mentally, right? So trying to create those environments is really important. We do have a question that came into the Q&A. It's asked, was there a culture shock or something that surprised you about life in college? Any thoughts on that question? Natan, you're shaking your head. Do you want to take this one?
I think Omar raised his hand, but I could jump in.
Oh no, I missed that. Okay, both of you. Go ahead, Natan, and then Omar.
Yeah. So be bluntly honest, my high school was, I say like 75% African American and then like 25% Hispanic Latino. And I live in an area where like all my neighbors are either Black or Hispanic. So going to Dartmouth, that was the first time I spent time with a lot of white people, and it was tough. It was extremely tough. And I think even being up there is like in the middle of the woods of Vermont and New Hampshire, yikes, where 1% of the population looks like me. And that's not an exaggeration. I think like even going to Walmart, getting particular stairs, going to CVS and getting a couple stairs, because I'm in the middle of the woods. So there's like literally Walmart and CVS and then maybe like 2 restaurants. So it was tough. It was tough not being able to escape to a city, not being able to find a proper barber. Uh, there were like these small little things that I didn't realize that I would miss, and that I had to adjust to. So that was a major culture shock for me. I think like even the way I would speak or the way I would dress. Everyone would ask me if I was like had a special event or something. And I'm like, no, it's just culturally like we get fly on Fridays. Like that's just what it is. So I had to, there was so many things that I just didn't understand. And that I felt super isolated because I couldn't communicate properly with like people on campus or they couldn't understand me. Um, but luckily, I was part of the first generation student organization on campus. And through that, I found, I was going through similar experiences with people from that group. In my class, especially, I identify as Afro Latino, and in my class, especially, I had uh, four Dominicans, and that rarely happens. So that was like super cool. We would like make platanos in the basement. We would like cook up, and we would all like be dancing, put on music. So that was exciting. I also lived in this cultural center called Shabazz. So that's like Malik Shabazz is the African American home on campus. So there's different housing depending on if you want to live in one of these centers. So that's where I lived. That was my safe haven. That's where I went. And eventually, when I joined rugby, is when I started to find these middle grounds between me and this larger community at Dartmouth. Um, and I was able to educate them, and they were able to educate me on some of their stuff. And I found that there's obviously I still deal with microaggressions in class. I still dealt with even microaggressions from some professors. But I would say that ultimately I was able to find my space, one, relying on my allies, relying on the people who look like me, and then further finding people outside of my space where maybe rugby was it was easier for me to find that space with them, because we just wanted to win. So there wasn't all these external factors that ultimately led me to be integrated in larger community.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing that. Omar, did you have anything that you'd want to add to what Natan shared?
Yeah, thanks so much for sharing that, Natan. I think that's a great answer. I think it's different for you and me because I'm white passing, and so for me to just be in a community of a lot of white people, and I'm coming from a community just like yours. I mean, Elizabeth, New Jersey is mostly Hispanic and Black, and so I definitely felt that culture shock. But you know what? I felt even more the fact that so many people had a lot of money, and they were willing to spend a lot of money on social events, on stuff like that. And I literally couldn't even attend those things because it was just not in my pocket to do that. And so um, definitely identifying people who I was able to connect with and never felt the financial constraint. Um, but you know what I really like about Philadelphia though is that the West it's a Black community, and so it's just like Elizabeth, New Jersey, except it's not Hispanic, right? And so I'm able to. I mean, even when I go volunteer and work at Sayer Health Center, it feels like I'm walking in a community just like my own in Elizabeth, New Jersey, and and which is funny because I used to also work at a health center in Elizabeth, and so when I work at this health center and the one from back home, I'm like, my God, they're both understaffed. They're both sharing similar issues, and it's like a home away from home, right? Um, and it's great for me. I mean, I love wearing multiple hats, helping where I can because I speak Spanish and Arabic, and so if I need to translate, I'm always ready for that. And I think, but yeah, the first impression I ever had was, my God, this is a lot of money, and I've never seen it.
Yeah, Karina, I'm going to go to you as well. I think this is a really important question. Do you want to share anything about your experience or about at Berkeley or your transition to Berkeley?
Yeah, so I'm from San Diego, right? I think I had my first culture shock moment actually in high school, because I grew up in the Southeast, right? So that was like Lincoln High School, around there, and so I was going to write elementary school in the Southeast, and my mom decided to move me to like high school and like middle school in like the white area, white populated area. So it was like, oh, whoa, right? Like I was like the first like Latina, the first person of color in my classes, right? In AP classes. So I had that in high school, and it was a lot. It was a lot to take in. And then coming into Berkeley, I was like, okay, wait, like why is there people who don't look like me as well in my classes? So I was like, wait, there's way too many. Like, okay, wait, like let me calm down. Let me like, where's my community? Let me find my community. And you're gonna find that in college because there's people who do look like you, right? And there's people and professors who want to see you succeed. So definitely my professors were there, especially my ethnic studies professors were there for me and have been there for me, especially when it comes to like letters of rec, right? And again, like the multicultural center was there for me. And there's a lot of different centers here. We have the Latinx center, right? You have Raices, you have but the Black Retention and Recruitment Center, right? And just being able to be there with community and being able to really talk about things that you don't necessarily talk to, right, within your family, right? Because depression is real, right? All these things are real, and like definitely being there with community helps a lot, and finding your community.
Yeah, Natan or Omar, anything else you want to add on this topic, kind of based off what the others shared?
I think I would add, I don't want to scare everyone. I realized like after sharing that might scare some people. Um, I think like, yes, those are experiences that I went through and they're very real. Um, but I was able to still be successful and get out of them, like get through them, and make the best out of the situation. And I think that at the end of the day, that this is America, this is the country we live in. And I was sheltered in my community because I was surrounded by my people. And I didn't realize that when I left, now I'm armed with a whole nother set of skills on how to navigate both spaces. And I think that that's unique because the same can't be said for the counterpart. Like they may not know how to navigate spaces like where I'm from, and I know how to navigate both now. So that's a strength that I have. I would say it's challenging, but don't be scared. You have all the tools you need to be successful. And I say rely on your peers. Rely on your peers, rely on those allies, rely on those multicultural centers, the professors who want to be there for you, and do not get discouraged. It's going to be difficult, maybe, and maybe not. You might have amazing experience, and at all, this isn't a life experience. But if you have an experience like the one each of us had, definitely rely on those people.
Yeah, and if I may as well, I think this thing about just being an outsider in a community where everybody's supposed to be part of it it's a scary thought. But I don't want anybody to be discouraged. And it's a shame that people do get discouraged by this. And in my high school in particular, I can think of so many bright people who just did not even consider applying to, the schools in the Ivy League or whatever, because there's a stigma. And the stigma is, yeah, this is not for me. I'm not the kind of person. And I think that's so discouraging. Because the truth is, if someone like me or Natan or Karina, and we just come from communities that are disadvantaged, and we just have these setbacks, the fact that we are able to get into a community where people have a lot of advantages, that's empowering, because it's not something to be afraid of. It's something to be like, no, I want to be where I want to be, and it doesn't matter if the community accepts me or not, because the truth is, I'm able to accomplish the same things. I have a vision too, and don't be a victim of your circumstance is the message I'm trying to get across. And so even though our stories and our experiences might seem scary, it's actually, in fact, very empowering.
I love that. And I love what Karina just wrote in the chat for everyone. You are meant, excuse me, in all capital letters to be here. And I think that message, I know that we still have 2 more minutes, excuse me, but I almost want to end on that note, just because I think it's such a powerful, powerful message that you all have shared. And I do want to give you a special thank you, right? Because I know that you've shared just kind of general advice, but also more personal advice. And it's just really, really meaningful and impactful that you've been able to connect with the students this morning and to share your stories. So since we do just have about 1 minute or so left, I guess I'll just leave it to each of you. Is there any kind of final note that you would want to share with our students today? Kind of one last message. Go ahead, Karina. Yes.
I would say, like, don't let financial issues I guess, push you back from going to campus or like attending a university, whether it's a CC or whether it's a 4-year, right? Because there's so many resources on campus, right? Like there's so much money out there. There's so many scholarships that like, that you can get so much money out of. Like, I don't think I ever bought a book since like freshman year when like people were like, oh, there's this website, right? Like, so I'm like, oh, let me get on that, right? And like,
what is the website? You can't
like,
drop something like that and not say specific.
It was like lib.gen. And
okay.
there's like a whole bunch of others, right? But then like for like law classes, there was like a $300 book that wasn't on there, but professors will put this book on reserve. So I would go to the library and literally scan the pages because I'm like, I'm not gonna buy a $300 book, like what, right? And then yeah, just like applying to scholarships. Apply even for like a cost of adjustment. Like right now, you can get like $3,000 for a computer, and you could do this your freshman year and your senior year. So look into those for any university that you want to attend. There's also like basic needs holistic funds on your university, right? That they're gonna give you money if you're struggling, even if it's for rent, if it's for medical issues. Look into that because there's definitely a lot of money out there.
That's awesome. Omar, go for it.
Yeah, okay, cool. I think whenever I give tours, because I'm also a tour guide, I like to give this metaphor. It goes like this. It goes, if I gave a t-shirt to everybody who had the right SAT score or the right GPA, like everybody would have this t-shirt. A lot of people would, some people wouldn't, but this t-shirt, it would be a common t-shirt. Now, the t-shirt by itself is absolutely useless. It doesn't do anything. The t-shirt can't solve your problems. It's the person who's wearing it. And so I always tell people, hey, listen, don't worry about the t-shirt because you're more than the t-shirt, right? Nobody looks for a t-shirt. They're looking for the person wearing it, the thoughts behind it, the character behind it. And so I like to use that metaphor to kind of downplay the importance of scores and numbers and upplay the character behind an individual.
I know we're a little bit out of time. I just want to jump in quickly and say, like, you are in the perfect moment in your life right now. Like, this is it's going to be a roller coaster of emotions, the ups, the downs, but it's super exciting once you make it to the end. And I think that just trust yourself, trust the process, be genuine, be authentic. Don't try to fit a mold. Like, you're perfect, and whatever you display through your application is exactly what the university wants. The university's trying to build a unique class. So don't try to fit the mold of the person before you who went or what you think they want to see. Just do what you want to do. And I think that's one of the most important things, even when you get on campus. The world is literally your oyster right now. And I think this is the most exciting time. Like, going back on it, I wish I wasn't as anxious as I was because everything worked out in the end. And I think that that's one of the most important things, is that things will work out. And like, there's so many opportunities right now. So just like, don't get overwhelmed with them, but be super excited about what's on the other side, because you're going to enter a new world that there's just so many things at your disposal. But just make sure that you stay genuine, remember where you come from, stay humble, but most importantly, just like, be curious and just and really believe in yourself and just keep going. I think that's one of the most important things. Is this process is exciting.
Well, you three are amazing. I'm fired up. I feel like I'm just ready to take on the world today and every day. You guys really are just incredible to spend your time with our students this morning and to share such incredible insights. So thank you for taking the time. The one thing I am going to do is I'm going to follow up with the three of you and maybe see if you can email me a list of some of the URLs of different resources that you've utilized on your campus. So maybe it's a website for the Multicultural Center, maybe it's a website for a student organization, for a place where you're getting your books covered, right? All of those resources. And then what I'll do is I'll put together an email and send it to everyone who was registered for today, so that even if they don't end up at Penn, Dartmouth, or Berkeley, they can still see these are the types of resources that exist on college campuses. And I think it would be great if we could kind of guide them for where to find that information. So I'll be sure to follow up with all three of you. Again, thank you to all of you. You are amazing. And I will definitely follow up with you all. And thank you to everyone who joined us this morning. I'm sorry we couldn't get to everyone's questions, but we hope this was really helpful for you all. So have a great day, everybody. Thank you again.